Hello, everyone. We are back. Happy Monday. I hope y'all had a wonderful weekend. My name is Carly Riley. I've been covering the Sam Bankman-Fried trial for the past month and broadly covering tech and finance, especially when there's a scandal. Do y'all remember 8 months ago when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed and the world worried that this would be the end of regional banking?
The question now, though, is whether the collapse of this tech-friendly regional bank is the start of something more serious.
The basic contours of this were Silicon Valley Bank had invested too much money into long-term treasury bonds that then dropped in value when interest rates went up, and suddenly they couldn't afford to pay back all of the customers who wanted to start withdrawing their money, who could do that at an instant on a dime. This may sound familiar. It's because the problem was one of mismatched durations, which might as well become the new title of this podcast, because we've talked about it. We talked about it last week in the case of WeWork. We talked about it in the case of FTX. Now, of course, once again, we're talking about it again in the situation with Silicon Valley Bank. Well, one of the questions around the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank was, where were the regulators?
Should regulators have really foreseen these bank collapses?
Regulators probably should have seen this coming.
And today, folks, we may just have one answer, which is, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal this morning, the answer is they were too busy getting drunk and harassing female employees to properly do their jobs and protect the American consumer. That's right. According to a Wall Street Journal report, quote, an internal review cited the FDIC's struggles to retain examiners as part of the reason it didn't detect problems with some of the failed banks earlier. And why can't the FDIC retain employees? According to implications strongly made by this Wall Street Journal article, drunkenness and debauchery. Quote, female examiners left the FDIC because of what they say was a sexualized boys' club environment and the belief they were consistently given fewer opportunities than their male counterparts, according to interviews with more than 100 current and former employees, including more than 20 women who quit. Hot damn. Okay, so the collapse of our regional banking crisis really comes down to toxic workplace culture and misogyny.
Yo, I hate to see that.
Oh, you hate to see that.
But let's talk a little bit more about this, because I am actually no stranger to news articles that describe a broadly toxic, sweeping, problematic workplace. I was a part of a workplace that once was the subject of such an article, and I was actually cited as being a victim of negative workplace culture, despite the fact that I did not feel that way or see myself as a victim of a toxic workplace culture at all. And this has led me to be skeptical of sweeping accusations of toxic workplaces, which is not to say that I'm generally skeptical of specific individual women's claims about their own experiences. But what I find is in these kinds of sweeping toxic workplace culture generalization pieces, you're actually sometimes talking about the claims of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 women over the course of perhaps a decade that then get written up in a way that makes it seem like most women or a majority of women in an organization are having a particular experience. And I actually think this isn't helpful for women's movements, because I think it's helpful to get claims around sexual harassment really precise and right. Let's talk about this Wall Street Journal article and come to some sort of conclusion about what's been reported here. Before we do, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, Ledger, OpenSea, and Web3 Cents. Let's hear from Ledger right now. Y'all know the phrase, not your keys, not your crypto. Well, in a world where too many people have had to learn that the hard way, Overpriced JPEGs is proud to partner with Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. Ledger's Nano S Plus and Nano X hardware wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, Ledger's own software for setting up your Nano device and managing your crypto assets, is the easiest way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control of your digital assets. You can use all your favorite dApps with Ledger Live, accessing 15 plus Web3 apps, including 1inch, Paraswap, Lido, and Xerion. So you can not only manage, but also grow your portfolio. And Ledger Live is available on mobile and desktop. Securing digital assets shouldn't be complicated. Ledger is as easy as it gets. Uncompromising security, effortless connectivity, full transparency, Ledger is your one-stop shop to trade and track crypto, grow your assets, and manage NFTs. Secure your future with Ledger. Visit shop.ledger.com today or check out the link in the show notes. Let's talk about what this Wall Street Journal article reports on. Here was one comment on the article. As a woman in the financial services field for 30 years, I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in Casablanca.
Well, I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here.
Fantastic reference, Lisa G. Point here being, obviously, she's worked in financial services for a number of years, and she is not in the least surprised to discover that there are claims of sexual harassment at the FDIC. And of course, this strikes me as a very valid perspective. Harassment is absolutely a problem. It exists in all industries. And so let's look at specifically what has been alleged and what seems to be true in this article. We have 6 different women who have claims here in one way or another. We have Lauren, who had a colleague send her a naked photo of himself, a photo of his penis, unsolicited. She had a male colleague follow her to her hotel room at one point when they were on the road. It is not made clear whether the person who sent her the naked photo and the person who's followed her to her hotel room was the same person. And I think this is something I'll talk about a little later when I talk about where it's maybe helpful or healthy to be vigilant about what's being written, is like it's made to sound like those are 2 different employees, which may be the case. You may have 2 different men badly behaving, or this could be the same person who's being made to seem like they're 2 different people, which changes the scope of the problem. A male employee invited her to a strip club. A supervisor asked other people who she was sleeping with within the FDIC. So this one woman had a number of bad experiences. Another woman was told by a male supervisor who was complaining about his sex life to her. And he said, if you were naked in this office, I would fuck you right here. There was another manager who apparently there were a couple of complaints against. He called gay employees my little princesses. He invited employees to a strip club. He apparently made comments about women's appearances. Our 4th problem here was a gentleman who slept with one of his female employees twice, then took her and another employee out for drinks during the workday, encouraged her to drink whiskey, said, don't be a pussy, have the whiskey.
How you like to drink your whiskey in the way that you see fit.
Number 5, we have a gentleman who an examiner in training complained about as early as 2014. However, he remained in charge until this past summer when multiple employees complained to management about him. Finally, we have a woman who described just broadly that there was this boys club environment that she ultimately quit because she just didn't really feel comfortable with it. Okay, so 6 different individuals who have either alleged something or had something alleged against them. What's more, an inspector general investigation in 2020 found that the agency's tracking of misconduct allegations, quote, decentralized, untimely, incomplete, and inaccurate. It said the agency wasn't able to identify all the allegations of sexual misconduct employees had made and was unable to track patterns of harassment by individuals or in certain offices. The Inspector General's report in 2020 also cited a survey that had been conducted in 2019 that found 8% of more than 2,300 respondents said they had been sexually harassed, and that 38% of those harassed said they didn't report the incidents for fear of retaliation. But then that same report also said that the FDIC received 12 allegations of sexual harassment from 2015 to 2019. MSP. Okay, so that's the picture that's being painted here, which is that you have these anecdotes that are being shared about these individual women's experiences, and then you have these broader statistics and metrics from this Inspector General's report. Now, I think this is pretty damning, right? I find the statistics here especially damning. So I want to make it clear that I'm glad that this Wall Street Journal article exists. I'm glad that light is being shed on this, and I hope it causes the FDIC to take a look internally and to seriously improve their processes, which sound like they are just broadly disorganized. And a priority needs to be placed on telling employees, telling women that they absolutely need to and should report what they're experiencing, that there will be recourse and investigations. Like, all of those things are table stakes and should be happening, and clearly aren't. And the truth is, that is enough as a story. But in my experience, and what I am observing in this article, is that it isn't just left there. That somehow maybe the sense is that that isn't enough. And so what has to happen is to create the sense that the scope of a problem is perhaps even larger or crazier than it really is. Here's another comment on the article. Sounds like the 1980s. Shame on FDIC management for allowing and contributing to the behavior by not practicing some bud nipping. So I understand why this commenter said that. The title of this Wall Street Journal article is Strip Clubs, Lewd Photos, and a Boozy Hotel, the Toxic Atmosphere at Bank Regulator FDIC. Employees say sexual harassment, misogyny pervade federal agency tasked with ensuring stability of nation's banks, driving women to leave. And then you read this long article that says a lot of different things. And so you have folks who walk away with the sense that this sounds like the 1980s. Mad Men, working girl, boss grabbing your ass stuff, right?
Can you take the long way up? I am really enjoying the view here.
I don't think so. I think the current day FDIC probably isn't really like the 1980s. But I understand why somebody walks away from this article feeling that way. And this brings me to where I think we need to be careful and really vigilant about how things get reported. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Taking this quote that I mentioned earlier, it says, female examiners left the FDIC because of what they say was a sexualized boys' club environment and the belief they were consistently given fewer opportunities than their male counterparts, according to interviews with more than 100 current and former employees, including more than 20 women who quit. Okay, this is something that I know well because this was done in the article that I was mentioned in, which is this journalist says female examiners left the FDIC because of the sexualized boys' club environment. And then she says, according to interviews with more than 100 current and former employees, including more than 20 women who quit. What that makes it sound like is that 100 employees corroborated that there is this sexualized boys' club environment who believed that women were being given fewer opportunities than their male counterparts. It also sounds like 20 women were spoken with who had quit because of this sexualized environment and this feeling that they weren't being given equal opportunities. That's not technically what this sentence says, though. And it is possible for this sentence to be true and for it to have been the case that this journalist spoke with more than 100 current and former employees, including 20 women who quit, and 6 of them described an environment like this, described that they felt that this was really true and that women weren't being given the right opportunities and that it was a total boys' club. What isn't clear in this sentence is out of those more than 100 employees that this journalist spoke to, how many of them really said this is an absolutely toxic, misogynistic, horrendous work culture? We don't actually know that number. But if you read this sentence quickly and you're not media savvy and you haven't been on the receiving end of these things before, you think it's all 100 of them. It's all 110 people or 105 people, however many were actually spoken with. Now, maybe all 100 of them did say that this was a total boys' club, sexualized, misogynistic culture. My guess would be that that would have been made even clearer. Over 100 employees told me that this workplace was sexualized. That's a much stronger sentence. That's a much larger indictment. And if that were true, I would think that that would be what this said. Then let's talk about those 6 stories that I outlined earlier. One of them happened in 2018. The same woman that had somebody tell her that if you were naked in this office, I would fuck you, was told years later separately that a supervisor who gave her a bad review was just intimidated by tall, beautiful women and that she should just smile and make him feel good. That happened in 2018. One of these situations happened in 2022 where basically the woman who just felt that it was like a boys' club and she wanted to leave. There was no claim of explicit harassment, but just the sense that there was a boys' club. That was somebody who left in 2022. All of the other stories that I described here happened in 2013, 2014 era. I think one maybe was as late as 2016. 2 of these situations led to a man being demoted and relocated. Now, the argument is that they should have been fired. And in one of the cases, I definitely agree with that. In one of the cases, I think it's a little bit less clear. In any case, we're talking about incidences that took place about a decade ago. And then there's all of these, some of which you've heard so far. Quote, an internal review cited the FDIC's struggles to retain examiners as part of the reason it didn't detect problems with some of the failed banks earlier, which was followed by the statement that, quote, about 60% of examiners were men in 2022, down from around 66% in 2004. At another moment, this article says, quote, resignations of examiners in training more than doubled in 2021 to 54 from 24 the previous year and rose to 62 in the first 9 months of 2022. In another place, quote, the agency, however, has highlighted its struggle to attract and retain female examiners in every annual diversity report since 2011. And another point, quote, female examiners left the FDIC because of what they say was a sexualized boys' club environment. Okay, so obviously, collectively, all of these statements are designed to lead you to the conclusion that there's this struggle to retain female talent, that there's these waves of resignations, and that it's happening because of this toxic workplace culture. Well, let's look a little closer at just a couple of these. So one of the lines here was that resignations of examiners in training more than doubled in 2021 to 54 from 24 the previous year and rose to 62 in the first 9 months of 2022. The FDIC's Inspector General said in a February report without citing any causes. So to me, the sense you're supposed to take away from this, given the collectiveness of all of this, is again that there's this toxic culture that's leading more and more people to leave. And yet, the FDIC said its data shows that since 2015, female examiners have left the agency at similar and sometimes lower rates compared to male examiners. So this is the FDIC saying, look, we don't think that this problem is so pervasive that this is like the leading reason that we don't have enough staff or we don't have enough examiners, right? Like we did not fail to catch the problems with Silicon Valley Bank because of pervasive harassment of women in our offices. So that's what they're trying to say here. At another point in the article, we learn that last year, so in 2022, when 62 people resigned or whatever, right, according to that quote, 12.2% of female examiners left the agency last year and 11.8% of male examiners left the agency last year. Those are pretty comparable percentages. So it's not as though you have women leaving en masse much, much more than men are. What's more, when I went onto Glassdoor and read reviews of FDIC, there were a lot of complaints about a change to the remote work policy, which obviously, if you're just thinking from first principles about why a bunch of people would start leaving in 2021, 2022, changes to COVID policies seems like they would maybe have a good deal to do with that. And then you have this quote from the journalist who says, the agency, however, has highlighted its struggle to attract and retain female examiners in every annual diversity report since 2011. And that line comes after she cites this stat by the FDIC saying, you know, we've seen pretty much comparable rates of women and men leaving the agency. This hasn't been like a woman-heavy problem. And that's when this article says, but they continue to cite that they have this problem attracting and retaining female talent. So if you look at last year's annual report that she's talking about here, they say very specifically, the problem that they had was for the class of 2021 to 2022, like that examiner class, they had lower rates of white and Hispanic women applying than they were expecting, and that they had lower hiring rates, that they actually had higher rates among certain minorities, but that's specifically among white and Hispanic women. They had fewer applications than they were expecting, which led to fewer women being hired. And then here are the ways they're going to correct for that for the 2022-2023 cycle. And look, I'm not one who takes corporations at their word. So it may be BS. They may have a problem. They may not be hiring enough women or recruiting enough women or doing enough to recruit those women or whatever. I don't know. But that's not really what's being alleged in this article. The allegations and the sense you're meant to leave with in this article is really more that they're not doing enough to retain the female talent. And in fact, they're pushing their female talent away because of this toxic workplace. And I'm just not sure that that's entirely backed up by the data that's being quoted here. But when you take these lines just in aggregate and you read it all, you just walk away with this big picture impression that we're back in the 1980s. And I don't think that that's true. Finally, I will say this. The article does in one paragraph, and this is a lengthy article, it says, in some offices, particularly those that required less travel, employees said they found the environment professional and didn't experience inappropriate behavior or harassment. Again, this goes back to my point earlier about how this reporter talked to over 100 current and former employees and kind of phrases it in a way that makes it sound like this pervasive sexual harassment was being experienced by all of them, or that all 20 women who had quit the agency had done so because of this pervasive environment, when the reality is some percentage of those 100 employees, perhaps even a majority, likely said, you know, I haven't really experienced this. Continuing on, the article says, the FDIC has more than 80 office locations, and current and former employees said many of the regions operate as their own fiefdoms, meaning a regional or field office's culture depends heavily on the people in charge. But what wasn't done in this article was, are the majority of incidences coming out of 5 of these 80 office locations? Maybe there are 5 really bad apples in this organization. And it's super valid to report on those 5 really bad apples. But then it's misleading to make it seem like wholesale, this is this across the board sweeping problem within the FDIC. I hope the FDIC cleans up their act. I hope they get some better processes in place to process complaints, to deal with them. But as readers, I also hope that folks will be savvy when they read pieces like this and be precise about what the problems are, as opposed to coming away thinking like, oh my gosh, we've made no progress since 1985. Because the truth is, that's not true. And I think it's important that when pieces like these get written, that they are done with real precision. Because the truth of this, what's definitely true about this, is sufficiently bad for it to warrant a report. You don't need to add on these other vagaries like, oh, they can't attract and retain talent, and perhaps that's why Silicon Valley Bank has failed. You don't need to make these other statements that imply there's a bigger problem than maybe there is, without knowing that the statement you're making is actually related to the problem you're describing. All right, folks, that's today's episode. A little bit of a different one, a little bit of a media watch. I'll probably do ones like this again in the future because it is something I feel pretty passionately about. It's something I struggle with as somebody who also is a content creator. I understand the desire to make it seem a little bit more salacious or a little bit more damning, or you have the clickbait headline. I just think that it's something that we culturally should be aware of. All right, folks, thank you so much. Huge thank you once again to OpenSea and Web3 Sense and Ledger. Let's hear from them now, and I'll see you next time. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, Web3 Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it.